This video is for you if you like illustrated posters of huge monsters and would like to learn about compositional techniques and graphic design principles. I'm going to take a close look at a recent art competition hosted by Talenthouse, where the task was to create illustrated posters for the Godzilla King of the Monsters movie. I will analyze the 5 winning posters and also some of my personal favorites from the hundreds of submissions. Join me if you want to geek out about Godzilla and learn how to create outstanding movie posters. Okay, so we have this amazing competition and some brilliant artwork submissions that we will go through. But before we do that, I would like to actually talk a bit about the monster design and how Godzilla slightly changed from the 2014 version to the current 2019 version. So here's a quite good comparison where we can see the original Veta creature design on the left, and then we can see the new version on the right, which was slightly redesigned by ILM, or Industrial Light and Magic. And there's a couple of differences. First of all, the new version is roughly 10 meters taller. Not that the original one was already not tall enough, but the most obvious visual difference is definitely the fins on the back of Godzilla. Now, the first version, so the 2014, had these very sharp fins, and if I remember correctly, they were like 3 rows of fins on the back of Godzilla. So if this is the face, we had those 3 rows. I remember some scenes when Godzilla was swimming, could see these fins showing up, and they were very shark-like or crocodile-like. That was a really nice design, but I actually prefer the new version where we have more of a dinosaur type of fins. I guess the Stegosaurus had something similar to this, but also this is more reminiscent of the previous versions of Godzilla in some of the other older movies. Now, the other differences that we can see on the tail, for example, we have the previous version a very sharp tip, almost like a lens or like a spike, while on the new one, that's again a little bit more rounder and softer here at the end. Also, the tail is not as long as on the previous version, so it was shortened. And we can also see that the legs or the feet changed slightly and again looks more like a dinosaur. So we have the bigger claws, and also just the general shape of the feet are more dinosaur-like, while in the previous version we had more like, I would say, an elephant-like feet. And apart from these few details, the general aesthetic, the posture and proportions didn't change much. I would say maybe slightly the spikes were amended as well, so the surface and texture quality is slightly different, but generally it's almost exactly the same. And if we look at the official toys from the 2 movies, again, these confirm the main visual differences, so the fins and the feet, as I mentioned before. But generally, although I loved the original Veta design, I actually like these improvements that they've done for this new movie. If this was a computer game, I would say this is a level up. I feel like this is a more powerful, more interesting design. But enough of geeking out, back to the competition. And first of all, let's see what was in the brief. So most importantly, they were looking for an illustration, digital painting, or alternative poster design, which is a captivating and imaginative poster that can help to promote the movie. Now, the main reference for the style and inspirations were these posters that were obviously created for the movie. So these were all the official artwork. And then a couple of restrictions that they mentioned, that Godzilla shall not speak any human language in the posters. Also, Godzilla shall not be killed, so he shouldn't be dead in the poster. And also, Godzilla's use shall not be derogatory to its image. And from a stylistic point, it's important that Godzilla should be depicted with scaly skin, 4 fingers on each 2 hands, and 4 toes on each 2 feet. The arms should be short, and 3 rows of fins along the back. So it's still 3 rows like in the previous design, but obviously it should be with the new fin version, which we can see it already here in this poster. Now, Whoever entered this competition could download these images. So these 4 posters were the main references included. And these posters also show really well the 4 monsters or kaijus. So we have Rodan, we have King Ghidorah, and we have Mothra besides Godzilla. By the way, I really like these posters. So they all show the scale really well. So there's always indication of something that we can relate to. And then in comparison to that, we see the scale of these monsters. And also, I love the way they use these monochromatic colors. So we get a sense of each of these characters' nature. And also, they are very well color coded in the film as well. So these colors actually come back in the film. I don't want to spoil it, so you should watch it if you haven't seen it already. These original posters are great. Now let's take a look at the selected winners. So here we have the 5 posters side by side with the names of the artists underneath them. And I would say out of all of these, probably my favorite is this one from Gus Murtha, which is a really nice composition, but also I love the flow in this poster. So we have the flames flowing in the background, leading the eye from Godzilla to King Ghidorah. And even these details here in the foreground, which I guess are either scales or it could be even rubble or buildings, or I'm not exactly sure what that is. But again, there's a nice diagonal composition that leads from one side to the other. My only comment would be that the heads are overlapping. So we can clearly see this head here, which is great. This is where the highest contrast is, by the way. And we can also make out this head, but even this head is overlapping the neck. So there is already a bit of an overlap issue here, but there's definitely a big overlap issue on the left side. So where Godzilla's head is completely covering up the 3rd head. The character on the right, Ghidorah, having 3 heads is obviously a very important element of the design. So that should be a slightly bit more emphasized in my opinion. But apart from that, again, I love the style itself, and I really like the fact that we go completely black on some details. So the artist only had to indicate certain areas instead of creating a texture on the whole body, and even on the wings, we have indications of texture and detail, but not covering fully everything. And that is a very hard thing to do. So when you are doing illustrations, the least amount of details you can use to indicate something is usually the best. So instead of adding so much detail, try to simplify your designs. And here's an amazing example of that when it works. Now, these are the other 4 selected winners for the competition. And although I like them, I'm not 100% sure whether they were the best to select. So let me go through again pros and cons. First of all, let's start with Chris Ramirez's work here on the left. The general style is really cool and I like the colors used, but I'm not too keen on the actual monster designs. And again, we have some overlap issues. For example, Godzilla's hand being on a tangent, so completely aligned to Ghidorah's wings. This building here on the left almost perfectly aligning or following the shape of Godzilla's leg. And also, I feel like the proportions of perspective is a little bit strange. Godzilla's perspective would indicate that we are looking at the scene from below, which is like the normal way of looking at it. But then Ghidorah feels like it's much smaller. It doesn't have that perspective or scale. So even though the heads and the height would indicate that this monster is taller and bigger, somehow the perspective just doesn't perceive that. This is a very tricky thing to do, and you have to make sure you get the perspective right if you want to include 2 main characters in a poster. So whenever you are doing illustrations, just make sure you think about these relations. Moving on to the second poster, I again really like that there's only small indications of details and there's big empty area all around. And then it's an interesting concept to have all the other monsters present. So we have Mothra here at the bottom. I guess we have Rodan's wing maybe here on the right. And then we have also Ghidorah here on the left, one of the heads. But it is so abstract and so simple or minimalist that I'm not 100% sure what I'm looking at. And also the general outline is a bit strange. So if you just look at the outline itself, again, it doesn't really mean anything. There's no smart play on negative space or any special thing that I can see could be a merit of this design. Maybe it's just me and I don't see something that is hidden in this poster, and maybe it's just too clever for me. But generally, I feel like, although it's a nice concept, it could have been elevated if it was a little bit more laid out. Now to the right, we have Pablo's design, and here, compared to the previous one, we have a really smart use of negative space. So using these big bulky fins in the new Godzilla design, the artist managed to squeeze in all the additional characters. So it's amazing that we have Ghidorah here, then we have Rodan's head here, and then we have Mothra here underneath. And additionally, obviously, we see Godzilla's outline. So this silhouette reads really well, and it shows everything, all the characters important for the movie. So out of these four, I think that one is a very smart and nicely executed design, clearly relying mainly on negative space. And finally, we have the last design here on the right from Tuck, which has a nice symmetrical composition. So we have a monster on the left, a monster on the right, and we can see the colors used. Again, the monochromatic theme from the main posters. We have the oranges on the left, and then we have the blues on the right, representing each of the monsters. Apart from all of this, we also have this big burst in the middle, which has all these lines coming out, emanating from the center, creating again interest and movement in the composition. So again, it's a great composition, nice execution. Although having said that, I'm not 100% keen on the shading on some details. So especially around here on the legs and the tail, some of the shading details could be improved a bit, and even here around the necks. So it's not bad, but it could have been slightly better. Again, great designs, all of them, and I'm not saying they didn't deserve to be selected as winners. But now let me show you a couple of additional entries or submissions that, in my opinion, could have easily deserved to be selected as winners. So these are just a few highlights from the hundreds of submissions. And the reason I selected them is because they really stand out in terms of their composition or style, or they just simply being very creative. Now, normally when I look at a design, the first thing I look at is the idea. So how creative it is, how unique it is. And then second, how good is the composition? So you can have an amazing idea, but if the composition fails, then nothing is going to really save your poster. And then third, and also of course a very important element, the actual execution. So the quality of the final details and the general design. So based on these three things, I usually judge every design. So let's take a closer look at each of these, and I'm going to again tell you my opinion and pros and cons. So we have first of all a really cool symmetrical design here, again showing all the monsters, and here we can clearly see the three lines of fins on Godzilla. And that's actually one of the best scenes from the movie, when we can see Godzilla coming towards us under the water. Again, spoiler alert there, but that's one of my favorite scenes or shots from the movie. And this illustration captures that really well. So I love that detail there at the bottom. Now, just to come back to what I said, I think the creative idea and composition is brilliant here. However, the execution could have been slightly better. I think the bottom half of the design, so this part, works really well, while the top area is slightly weaker. So again, the shading is mainly what I'm concerned about. Like, it's a bit too flat. Also, especially Rodan is very flat compared to the other characters. So that should have been a little bit more detailed in my opinion. Now, moving on, we have another great example of a unique style. It's more like a comic book style. And I love the way halftones were used here. So when we zoom closer, you can probably see this better. So we have the little dots, which is more like that printing technique, if you're familiar with it, where we have the dots representing each of the colors used. But this is obviously a really nice treatment. And also I really like the pose, and especially I love the waves. They are really nicely detailed, and even the treatment and style of the title I think is really good. Also we have a nice overlap with the hand coming over the type and Godzilla standing in front of the sun. These details both creating nice sense of depth, and generally the colors work really nicely as well. So overall I think this is a brilliant poster. Moving on, here we have another very creative poster. So instead of showing any of the monsters, we only see like a footprint. And although it doesn't really look like Godzilla's footprint, because as we talked about it, in the original design, it looked more like, I would say probably something like that. I think as they mentioned in the brief, it should be 4 claws or toes. So it would be more something like that. But still, I really like this composition. And I love the way that even the names of the monsters are represented as locations or points of interest on the map. We can even see the highway names, although they don't really mean anything, but that's also a nice touch. But most importantly, this is actually something underwater. So it's like a deep crater filled with water, and the elevation shows how deep we go in. And of course, the underwater world is very important for the movie. So that's a really nice touch. Instead of showing something like a mountain, we are actually seeing a deep sea elevation. Now, this submission is a great example of an extremely unique and creative idea, a good composition, but something that is lacking in execution. It's not bad. Again, I'm saying like the illustration itself is good, but it was just a little bit overcooked in Photoshop. There's too much effects, and the main problem I think is that it lost focus. So the whole thing is lacking focus and on crucial details. So of course, as you can see, this design resembles more of a stained glass church window where Godzilla looks more like a saint. Very unique and smart. As I said, the composition and the idea is just brilliant. And I think if it was rendered or colored differently, it could have been also a winner for sure. At least if I was judging. Now, this composition, of course, can also be slightly risky to have a religious connotation to something like Godzilla. And I'm not sure whether that would have worked well, internationally especially. So it could be slightly sensitive to do this, but I think it's not like 100% obvious what religion it would be used in. Now, of course, it's more resembling Christian stained glass window designs. And maybe that's why it wasn't selected as a winner. As I said, again, it might be slightly sensitive topic. But going back to the quality or the treatment that I think was a little bit overcooked, it's mainly the blurriness, and also there's a lot of effects going on instead of focusing on the important details. So I think especially Godzilla's body should have deserved a little bit more high contrast detail, making sure that things like the hands are clearly separating from the body, because at the moment that's not really the case. And also I feel like the type here at the bottom really clashes with the whole design. So maybe this could have been done again more like part of the stained glass window. Also, I'm not sure why the artist included the signature here in the middle, almost like a watermark, but I guess that's not big of a deal. That's probably something just to protect the artwork if someone is trying to steal it. But moving on, here we have another really cool example. Now this one is actually a lino print. And if you're not familiar with the technique, we actually have a video in our 365 Days of Creativity series where Shumi shows you how to use this method to create prints and then turn that into a pattern. So if you're interested, check out that quick 1-minute video, which will show you exactly how this is done. But of course, in this example, the artist used this technique and created a very unique treatment, which is more traditional media than digital. I'm not sure whether it was touched up or improved digitally, but it's a really nice example of, again, a unique composition, but also a unique media. Now, I'm not sure why it wasn't selected as a winner. Maybe because the monsters look quite different from the designs in the movie, but Maybe it was just overlooked because there was literally hundreds of submissions. Anyway, I think this is just a great design, great composition, and great final treatment. And there's a really cool detail here. I'm not sure if you noticed Godzilla grabbing Ghidorah's tongue. I just love that design, so I just removed my mark from there so you can see it better. And this is also a good example of showing that even when we work with the 3 heads, there can be a way to show all 3 of them without having overlap or tangent issues. One thing that I'm not too keen about is this UFO here on the top. I'm not sure whether that actually works with the story, and maybe that was one of the reasons why this wasn't selected. But also the planets, not really sure about those. They are probably not needed. Instead, it would have been good to include Rodan, the other monster, because we only have 3 of the monsters here. Maybe Rodan is also there somewhere, I just can't find it. But this would be my only negative criticism for this otherwise amazing poster. Here we have another very different and unique poster, extremely simplistic or minimalist, but witty and smart, especially this part here at the bottom where it says you. So you can actually see the scale difference between a person and all the rest of the monsters. And it almost works like an infographic where you can clearly see the size of these monsters and the differences between them. And although it's a minimalist design, it still has some nice textures and grunge details around the edges, which works well. And although there's only 2 colors, I think they are really well selected, gives enough contrast, and white, red and black, even though with black we only have a little bit of detail here on the side. It's a very strong combination, and it works well because it's almost like a warning. So these colors definitely work for that, to grab the attention and to warn us about the monsters. Now, in terms of illustration, this poster does probably the best depiction of Godzilla. So it's a great design, lots of details went into it, and it really represents well the new version, again with all the new fins and the proportions and everything. And also even the environment, I really like the clouds, the lightning and the smoke of the buildings, the destruction in the back, and how Godzilla is enveloped in the clouds and is emerging from it. So I think this is a great illustration, mainly in terms of execution. The only argument against it would be that it's a little bit too simple for a composition, and also we don't see much action going on. So it's quite static in a way. So again, going back to the 3 things that we talked about, in terms of the treatment, the third aspect, this is superb. But in terms of composition and creative concept, it's a bit lacking. And last but not least, we have an example which again is totally unique. So concept is very unique. The composition is great, and also the treatment is brilliant. So this, I would say, definitely would have deserved to be selected as a winner. So it feels almost like a wireframe or like an instructional manual, the actual graphic style itself. But then we have all the monsters present. We have a really interesting diagonal composition again, which is almost like a V shape. So we have these lines coming and again directing the viewer's eye to the center, and that is where Godzilla's head is. So really nicely leading there. All these leading lines are directing our eyes to go in the center. And also this artist took the time to redesign the title for this style and really nicely incorporating it into the full composition. And if you are looking for Godzilla's name, which would normally be sitting here on top, it's actually here on the side. So we have it both in Japanese and in English. And we also have the other names here. So it's really nicely presented. We even have some additional information which just works well with this instructional manual style. So we can see that the size is explained here, and then we even have the Monarch logo there on the top, plus a made up page number here on the bottom right. So all in all, I think this is again a winning design in my personal opinion. So here we have again a few of my personal favorites from this competition. But if you want to check out all the other submissions, I highly recommend to follow the link from the description below and go to submissions, where you will be able to go through all the hundreds of entries, either based on the popular vote, because people can vote on each other's designs. So if you choose the selected ones, the most liked posters will come up, and obviously the selected artists are also here on the top. By the way, the judges normally on Talenthouse don't choose based on the popular votes, so don't get confused by that. But you can also search by which ones are the most recent ones. And of course, this is a closed competition, so don't try to submit your work because the winners were already selected and it's finished. The whole point of this review was to learn from all the entries and to go through a couple of design principles and illustration ideas, and which can hopefully help you and inspire you to do something, and also maybe to motivate you entering competitions in the future, either on Talenthouse or other sites like 99 Designs. Let us know in the comment section what would you like us to cover next time on this series. Click on the link in the description or the join button to become a member if you want to work on future projects with us and see the whole design or illustration process live. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.